Sarah Martinez clutched her worn leather bag tighter as she approached the imposing glass doors of Blackstone Industries. The towering corporate building stretched endlessly into the cloudy Seattle sky, its reflective windows making her feel smaller with each step. At 23, she had faced her share of challenges, but nothing quite like this moment. The morning had started like any other in her cramped studio apartment. Sarah had carefully pressed her only professional outfit, a navy blazer she'd bought second-hand 3 years ago for her college interviews. The fabric was slightly faded and one button hung loose, but it was clean and respectable. She had practiced her introduction in the mirror dozens of times, preparing for what could be the most important job interview of her life. The position was for a junior analyst role at one of the city's most prestigious investment firms. Sarah knew she was underqualified on paper. Her degree from the local community college didn't carry the same weight as the Ivy League credentials most applicants possessed. Her work experience consisted mainly of part-time jobs at coffee shops and a brief stint as a bookkeeper for a small grocery store. But she had something that couldn't be taught in expensive universities, an incredible mind for numbers and patterns that had amazed her professors. Growing up in the rough neighborhoods east of downtown, Sarah had learned early that opportunities didn't come knocking. Her mother, Elena, worked double shifts as a hospital cleaner to keep food on the table after Sarah's father disappeared when she was 8. Money was always tight. Dreams seemed like luxuries they couldn't afford, and college felt impossible until Sarah earned a full scholarship through her exceptional grades. As she walked through the lobby, Sarah noticed the stark difference between herself and the other people waiting in the sleek reception area. Men in $1,000 suits checked expensive watches while women in designer clothing typed on the latest smartphones. Their conversations buzzed with mentions of vacation homes, exclusive restaurants, and private schools for their children. Sarah felt like an outsider looking through a window into a world she had only seen in movies. The receptionist, a polished woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, looked up from her computer screen with barely concealed disdain. Her eyes quickly scanned Sarah's appearance, taking in the slightly wrinkled blazer, the scuffed shoes that Sarah had polished 3 times that morning, and the generic black bag that had seen better days. The woman's smile was cold and professional, the kind reserved for people she deemed unworthy of genuine warmth. "You must be here for the cleaning crew orientation," the receptionist said, without waiting for Sarah to speak. "The service entrance is around back through the alley. Someone will meet you there with uniforms and supplies." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "Actually, I'm here for an interview. Sarah Martinez, 10:30 appointment with Mr. Harrison's team." The receptionist's eyebrows rose slightly, and she made no effort to hide her surprise. "Oh," she paused, clearly reconsidering her initial assessment. "Well, let me check the system." Her fingers clicked across the keyboard with unnecessary force, as if the computer might somehow confirm that Sarah didn't belong there. "I'll need to see some identification," the receptionist said after locating Sarah's appointment. The request came with a tone that suggested this was an unusual requirement, though Sarah suspected it was standard procedure for everyone. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet, extracting her driver's license. The plastic card was standard issue, nothing fancy or distinctive about it. She had renewed it just 6 months earlier at the DMV, waiting in line for 3 hours because she couldn't afford to take time off work for an appointment. As she handed over the ID, Sarah noticed the receptionist's expression shift to something approaching amusement. The woman held the license up to the light, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny as if checking for forgeries. Her actions drew the attention of 2 security guards stationed near the elevators, both of whom began walking toward the reception desk with curious expressions. "Is there a problem?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the nervousness out of her voice. "Just following protocol," the receptionist replied, though her smirk suggested she was enjoying the process more than necessary. "We have to be very careful about security in a building like this. You understand?" One of the security guards, a heavy-set man with graying hair, approached the desk and gestured toward Sarah's license. "Everything all right here, Janet?" "Just verifying identification," Janet replied, handing the ID to the guard. "Making sure everything checks out." The guard took the license and walked over to a sophisticated scanning device mounted on the wall near the security checkpoint. Sarah had noticed similar machines in airports and government buildings, but this one looked more advanced, with multiple screens and a complex array of lights and sensors. Several other people in the lobby had begun to take notice of the commotion. A A group of young professionals in expensive suits whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing in Sarah's direction with expressions ranging from curiosity to condescension. An older woman carrying a designer handbag shook her head disapprovingly, as if Sarah's mere presence somehow diminished the building's prestige. Sarah stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, trying to maintain her composure despite the growing audience. She had faced discrimination before, subtle and not so subtle reminders that she didn't belong in certain spaces. But this felt different, more public and humiliating. The weight of every gaze in the lobby seemed to press down on her shoulders. The security guard inserted her license into the scanner, and Sarah watched as various lights began to flash across the machine's display. Red lights, yellow lights, numbers and codes scrolling across multiple screens. The process seemed to take much longer than it should have, and Sarah began to worry that there might actually be some problem with her identification. "Interesting," the guard muttered, studying the readout with a puzzled expression. He tried the scan again, watching as the same sequence of lights and data appeared on the screen. Janet tapped her manicured nails on the desk impatiently. "Is there an issue with the ID?" The guard scratched his head, looking genuinely confused. "No, it's valid. Actually, it's more than valid. But that can't be right." He called over his partner, a younger man with a more serious demeanor. "Mike, take a look at this. Have you ever seen a readout like this before?" Sarah felt her anxiety spike. She had no idea what could be wrong with her perfectly ordinary driver's license. The document was legitimate, issued by the state of Washington just like millions of others. There was nothing special or unusual about it, nothing that should cause this kind of confusion or delay. The second guard examined the scanner's display, his expression growing increasingly puzzled. "That's definitely not standard," he said quietly. "We should probably call this upstairs." As more people in the lobby turned to stare, Sarah realized that what had started as a routine identity check was quickly becoming something much more complicated and potentially embarrassing. She had no idea that her simple driver's license was about to reveal a secret that would change everything. The whispers in the lobby grew louder as more people gathered around the reception area. Sarah could feel dozens of eyes on her, and the weight of their judgment made her stomach churn. She had never been the center of attention in a place like this, and certainly not for reasons that seemed increasingly problematic. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step aside for a moment," the younger security guard said, his voice professional but firm. "There seems to be some kind of irregularity with your identification." Sarah's heart began to race. "I don't understand. Is there something wrong with my license? It's completely legitimate. I renewed it myself at the DMV just 6 months ago." Janet, the receptionist, leaned forward with obvious interest, her earlier disdain now mixed with curiosity. "What kind of irregularity?" she asked the guards, making no effort to lower her voice. The question carried across the marble lobby, ensuring that everyone within earshot would hear the response. The older guard, whose name tag read Bob, looked uncomfortable with the growing audience. He motioned for Sarah to follow him to a corner of the lobby, away from the main flow of traffic, but the gesture only made the situation more conspicuous. Several people changed their walking routes to get a better view of the unfolding drama. "Look, miss," Bob said quietly, "I've been doing security in this building for 15 years. I've scanned thousands of IDs, maybe tens of thousands. I've never seen a readout like the one your license just generated." Sarah felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. "What do you mean? What kind of readout?" Mike, the younger guard, rejoined them after making a phone call. His expression was serious, almost grave. "I just spoke with my supervisor upstairs. He wants to see the scan results immediately. This has apparently triggered some kind of protocol." "Protocol for what?" Sarah asked, her voice rising slightly despite her efforts to remain calm. "I'm just here for a job interview. I presented a valid driver's license. What could possibly be wrong with that?" The crowd in the lobby had grown larger, and Sarah noticed that several people were now openly recording the situation with their phones. The morning sun streaming through the glass walls seemed harsher now, highlighting every detail of her discomfort. She wondered if this incident would end up on social media, another viral video of someone being humiliated in a corporate setting. A well-dressed man in an expensive suit approached the group, his expression a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. "Excuse me, but what exactly is going on here? I have a meeting upstairs in 5 minutes, and this commotion is quite disruptive." Janet seized the opportunity to insert herself into the conversation. There's some kind of issue with this woman's identification. The security scanner detected some kind of anomaly. What sort of anomaly? The man asked, looking Sarah up and down with obvious skepticism. Is this a security threat? No, sir, Bob replied quickly. Nothing like that. The ID is legitimate, but it's triggering responses in our system that we've never seen before. We're just trying to understand what's happening. Sarah felt her frustration building. This is ridiculous. I have a job interview scheduled in 10 minutes. Can't you just let me up to the 32nd floor and sort this out later? The man in the expensive suit laughed dismissively. The 32nd floor? That's executive territory. I highly doubt you have business up there. He looked at her worn blazer and scuffed shoes with obvious disdain. Perhaps you're confused about which building you're supposed to be in. Heat flushed Sarah's cheeks, but before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. What seems to be the problem here? Everyone turned to see a tall woman in an immaculate gray suit approaching the group. Her presence commanded immediate attention, and even the crowd of onlookers seemed to step back respectfully. Sarah recognized her immediately from the company's website. Victoria Chen, the chief operating officer of Blackstone Industries. Janet immediately straightened, her casual attitude replaced by nervous professionalism. Miss Chen, there's a small security issue we're resolving. Nothing that requires your attention. Victoria's sharp eyes moved from the receptionist to the security guards to Sarah, taking in the entire situation with obvious intelligence. I see. And what exactly is this security issue? Mike stepped forward holding Sarah's driver's license. Ma'am, this woman's ID is generating unusual scanner results. We've never seen anything like it before. Victoria extended her hand. May I see the readout? Bob led her to the scanning station, where the displays still showed the mysterious data from Sarah's license. Victoria studied the screens carefully, her expression growing more interested with each passing second. After several minutes of examination, she turned back to the group with a completely different demeanor. This is quite fascinating, Victoria said, her voice carrying a note of genuine intrigue. Tell me, Ms. Martinez, Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah Martinez. Ms. Martinez, would you mind if I ask you a few questions about your background? Sarah nodded, though she couldn't imagine what her background could possibly have to do with a malfunctioning ID scanner. Of course. Where were you born? Here in Seattle. Well, technically in the University of Washington Medical Center. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. And your parents? My mother is Elena Martinez. She works at the same hospital where I was born, in housekeeping. My father. Sarah paused, the familiar pain of abandonment flickering across her features. He left when I was young. I don't know much about him. What was his name? Sarah hesitated. She rarely spoke about her father, and certainly not in front of a crowd of strangers in a corporate lobby. Roberto Castellanos. But he changed his name to Martinez when he married my mother. I don't really know why. Victoria's expression shifted subtly, and Sarah caught a flicker of something that might have been recognition. Did your mother ever mention what your father did for work? Not really. She always said he worked in security, but she was vague about it. After he left, she didn't like talking about him much. Sarah felt increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the questioning. I'm sorry, but I don't understand what this has to do with my job interview. Victoria glanced at her watch, then looked back at the security guards. I want you to run that scan one more time, but use the advanced protocols. And clear this area of observers. Ma'am? Bob looked confused. Move everyone back. This conversation is about to become private. The authority in Victoria's voice was unmistakable. Within minutes, the lobby crowd had been dispersed, and the area around the security station was clear except for Sarah, Victoria, and the two guards. Even Janet had been asked to return to her desk, though Sarah could see her straining to overhear the conversation. Now, Victoria said, turning back to Sarah, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you may come as a shock. But first, let's see what that scanner reveals when we dig a little deeper. As Mike prepared to run the advanced scan, Sarah felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. Something was happening here that went far beyond a simple job interview, and she had the unsettling feeling that her entire understanding of her own identity was about to be challenged. Mike's fingers moved across the scanner's control panel with practiced precision, accessing menus and settings that Sarah had never seen before. The advanced protocols Victoria had mentioned required additional security clearances, and Sarah watched as the guard input a series of codes that seemed to unlock deeper levels of the system. "This might take a few minutes," Victoria said, her tone gentler than before. "Why don't we sit down while we wait?" She gestured toward a small seating area near the windows, away from the main flow of lobby traffic. Sarah followed, her mind racing with questions she didn't know how to ask. The leather chairs were expensive and comfortable, but she perched on the edge of her seat, too nervous to relax. "Ms. Martinez," Victoria began, "I realize this situation must be very confusing for you, but I want you to know that you're not in any trouble. If anything, this might be the most fortunate day of your life." Sarah stared at her, trying to process the statement. "I don't understand. How can a problem with my ID be fortunate?" "Because it's not a problem. It's a revelation." Victoria leaned forward slightly, her expression serious but kind. "Tell me, have you ever wondered why you're so exceptional with numbers and patterns? Your professors at community college described your abilities as almost supernatural." Sarah's eyes widened. "How do you know about my professors?" "We've been looking for you for a long time, Ms. Martinez. Not you specifically, but someone like you. Someone with your particular combination of abilities and background." Before Sarah could respond, Mike called out from across the lobby, "Miss Chen, you need to see this." Victoria stood immediately, and Sarah followed her back to the security station. The scanner's display now showed a completely different set of information than before. Where there had been confusion and anomalous data, there was now a clear, structured readout with official seals and classifications that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. "My God," Bob whispered, staring at the screen. "Is that really what I think it is?" Victoria nodded gravely. "I'm afraid so." She turned to Sarah, whose face had gone pale. "Ms. Martinez, what you're looking at is a classified government marker embedded in your identification. It indicates that you are the daughter of someone with extremely high-level security clearance." Sarah felt the world tilt around her. "That's impossible. My father was just a security guard. He abandoned us when I was 8 years old." "Your father was many things, but a simple security guard wasn't one of them." Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. "Roberto Castellanos was a deep-cover federal agent working on some of the most sensitive intelligence operations in the country. His disappearance wasn't abandonment, Sarah. It was extraction." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She gripped the edge of the security desk, trying to steady herself as everything she thought she knew about her life crumbled around her. "You're lying. That can't be true. My mother would have told me." "Your mother didn't know," Victoria explained. "Deep cover operations require complete separation from family, for the safety of everyone involved. Roberto's marriage to Elena and your birth were real, but they were also part of his cover identity. When the operation ended, he had to disappear to protect you and your mother from potential retaliation." Sarah's legs felt weak, and she sank into a nearby chair. "This is insane. You're telling me my entire life has been a lie?" "Not a lie," Victoria corrected. "A protection. But that protection is about to end, because you've inherited something from your father that makes you incredibly valuable to certain people." "What are you talking about?" Victoria exchanged glances with the security guards, then seemed to make a decision. "Bob, Mike, I need you to secure this area. What I'm about to discuss is classified at the highest levels." The guards nodded and positioned themselves to ensure their conversation remained private. Victoria pulled up a chair next to Sarah, her expression grave. "Your father wasn't just any federal agent. He was part of a specialized unit that dealt with financial crimes and international money laundering operations. His ability to spot patterns in complex financial data was legendary. It's what made him so effective at tracking criminal organizations through their monetary transactions." Sarah felt a strange tingling sensation, as if pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed were suddenly clicking into place. "The numbers," she whispered. "I've always been able to see patterns that others couldn't." "Exactly. You've inherited your father's gift, but in you it's even stronger. The genetic combination of his analytical abilities and your mother's intuitive intelligence has created something remarkable." Victoria reached into her briefcase and pulled out a tablet, quickly navigating to a secure file. 3 months ago, we identified a massive international conspiracy involving money laundering, arms dealing, and human trafficking. The financial networks are incredibly complex, spanning dozens of countries and involving hundreds of shell companies. Our best analysts have been working on it for months with limited success. She turned the tablet towards Sarah, showing a screen filled with financial data, transaction records, and network diagrams that looked impossibly complex. This is just a small sample of the data we're dealing with. Most people look at this and see chaos. What do you see? Sarah stared at the screen, and almost immediately patterns began to emerge. Connections that weren't obvious to the casual observer became clear to her trained eye. She could see the flow of money, the relationships between seemingly unrelated accounts, the sophisticated methods being used to hide the criminal activity. There, she said, pointing to a cluster of transactions. These accounts are all connected, but they're using time delays and intermediate transfers to obscure the relationships. And here, she indicated another section. This looks like a cleaning operation. They're moving dirty money through legitimate businesses, but the amounts and timing follow a pattern. Victoria's eyes widened. That's remarkable. You've just identified connections that took our team weeks to discover, and you've spotted things we missed entirely. Sarah looked up from the tablet, feeling overwhelmed. What does this mean? What do you want from me? We want to offer you a position with our intelligence unit. The job interview you came here for today was actually a cover. We've been watching you since you graduated from community college, waiting for the right moment to approach you. Watching me? Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. For how long? Since you solved that complex financial fraud case as part of your senior project. Your professor submitted your work to a federal database and it triggered alerts in multiple agencies. Your analysis was more thorough and accurate than anything our professional investigators had produced. Sarah remembered the project Victoria was referring to. She had chosen to analyze a local embezzlement case, treating it as an academic exercise. What had started as a simple assignment had turned into a comprehensive investigation that revealed fraud patterns extending far beyond the original crime. But this is crazy, Sarah protested. I'm nobody special. I live in a studio apartment and work part-time at a coffee shop. I can't be involved in international intelligence operations. That's exactly why you're perfect for this work, Victoria replied. Your anonymity is an asset. No one would suspect that a young woman from a modest background could be one of our most valuable analysts. Sarah looked around the lobby, at the expensive surroundings and well-dressed people, and felt the surreal nature of the situation wash over her. This morning she had been a nervous job applicant hoping for a chance to improve her life. Now she was being told that she was the daughter of a secret agent and that the government wanted to recruit her for classified operations. I need time to think about this, she said finally. This is too much to process all at once. Victoria nodded understandingly. Of course, but I need you to understand that this opportunity comes with certain risks. The people we're investigating are extremely dangerous, and they have resources and connections that extend into the highest levels of government and business. Are you saying I'm in danger? Not immediately, but if you decide to join us, if you help us unravel this conspiracy, then yes, there will be risks involved. These aren't ordinary criminals we're dealing with. Sarah stared at the tablet again, at the complex web of financial data that had seemed so clear to her moments before. She thought about her mother, working double shifts to make ends meet. She thought about her father, whoever he really was, and the life he had lived in the shadows. She thought about the choices that had led her to this moment, and the choice she now had to make. Sarah spent the next 3 hours in the operations center, completely absorbed in analyzing the financial networks displayed across the multiple screens. With each passing minute, she uncovered new layers of the conspiracy that both amazed and terrified her. The consortium's reach was far more extensive than she had initially imagined. Look at this, she said, tracing connections between seemingly unrelated accounts with her finger. They're not just moving money, they're creating artificial dependencies. These corporations in different countries appear independent, but they're all financially linked through hidden partnerships. If one fails, it creates a domino effect that the consortium can exploit. Agent Kim leaned over her shoulder, following her analysis with growing excitement. You're seeing patterns that our computer algorithms missed. How are you doing this? Sarah paused, trying to explain something that felt as natural as breathing. It's like looking at a river. Everyone else sees the surface, but I can see the currents underneath. The numbers tell stories if you know how to listen to them. Victoria watched from across the room, speaking quietly into a secure phone. Sarah caught fragments of the conversation, Mentions of exceptional analysis, ahead of schedule, and immediate deployment. The urgency in Victoria's voice made it clear that Sarah's discoveries were accelerating their timeline. Sarah, Victoria said, ending her call and approaching the workstation. We need to discuss something important. Your analysis in the last few hours has revealed connections that we've been searching for months to find. But it's also created a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that puts you in immediate danger. By identifying these financial pathways so quickly, you've essentially solved part of a puzzle that certain people have been very eager to keep hidden. If word gets out that we have someone with your capabilities, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying that just by being here, just by doing this analysis, I've made myself a target? I'm afraid so. The consortium has people everywhere, including within our own agencies. We have to assume that they'll learn about your involvement sooner rather than later. Agent Kim pulled up a new screen showing surveillance footage from various locations around the city. We've already detected unusual activity near your apartment building and your mother's workplace. Nothing overt yet, but the patterns suggest reconnaissance. Sarah's blood ran cold. My mother? They're watching my mother? It's standard procedure for them, Victoria explained grimly. Family members are leverage. They use loved ones to control people who might otherwise expose their operations. Sarah sank into a chair, the weight of the situation finally hitting her with full force. This morning she had been worried about making a good impression in a job interview. Now she was learning that her very existence posed a threat to a global criminal conspiracy, and that her mother might be in danger because of abilities Sarah had never asked for. What do we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We have two options, Victoria said, sitting down across from her. We can relocate you and your mother immediately, give you new identities, and hope the consortium loses interest. You'd be safe, but you'd never be able to use your real names again, and you'd always be looking over your shoulders. And the second option? We accelerate our operation. Instead of spending months gathering evidence, we use your abilities to expose the entire network quickly, before they can fully mobilize against us. It's riskier, but if we succeed, the threat ends permanently. Sarah looked around the room at the screens full of financial data, at the evidence of corruption and manipulation that stretched across the globe. She thought about all the innocent people whose lives had been destroyed by the consortium's greed, all the economies that had been destabilized for profit, all the crimes that had gone unpunished because the perpetrators had hidden behind layers of financial complexity. If I help you expose them, what are the chances we succeed? Agent Kim answered honestly. With traditional methods, maybe 30%. With your analytical abilities, closer to 70%. But Sarah, you need to understand that even if we succeed in exposing the financial networks, dismantling an organization this size and influence will take years, and during that time you'll remain a target. What about my mother? If you agree to help us, we'll move her to a secure location immediately. She'll be protected around the clock until this is over. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process the impossible choice she was being asked to make. Run and hide for the rest of her life, or fight back against an enemy that had unlimited resources and no scruples about hurting innocent people. When she opened her eyes, she found herself staring at a photograph on one of the screens. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, standing next to what appeared to be her parents. The caption below read, "Trafficking Victims, Romania Operation." Who is she? Sarah asked. Victoria followed her gaze. Her name was Anya. Her parents sold everything they owned to pay smugglers to bring the family to America for a better life. Instead, the smugglers were part of the consortium's human trafficking network. The parents were killed and Anya was forced into labor. Was? We found her 3 months ago. She didn't survive the rescue operation. Sarah stared at the photograph, at the hope and innocence in the little girl's eyes, and felt something harden inside her chest. This wasn't just about financial crimes or abstract concepts of justice. Real people were being destroyed by the consortium's activities, and she had the ability to help stop it. How quickly can you move my mother to safety? She asked. Victoria checked her watch. We can have a team at her workplace within the hour. She'll be in protective custody by tonight. And what about me? What happens next? We brief you on the full scope of the operation, give you access to all our financial intelligence, and let you work your magic. But Sarah, once we start this process, there's no going back. The consortium will know you're involved, and they'll do everything in their power to stop you. Sarah stood up, walking back to the wall of screens. The financial data that had seemed overwhelming hours earlier now looked like a puzzle she was uniquely qualified to solve. She could see patterns and connections that others missed, relationships that had been hidden beneath layers of complexity. "I'll need complete access to all financial records," she said, her voice stronger than before. "Banking data, corporate filings, transaction histories, everything. No restrictions, no classified limitations." "Done," Victoria replied immediately. "And I want daily updates on my mother's safety. If anything happens to her, the deal is off." "Understood. One more thing. I want to know everything about my father. Not just his professional activities, but who he really was. If I'm going to follow in his footsteps, I need to understand what kind of man he was." Victoria hesitated. "Some of that information might be difficult to hear. I can handle it. I'm stronger than people think." Agent Kim pulled up a new file on his computer, one marked with the highest security classifications. Roberto Castellanos, also known as Robert Martinez, also known by 6 other aliases. Born in El Salvador, emigrated to the United States at age 15, recruited by federal agencies while serving in the military, specialized in financial crimes and deep cover operations. Sarah studied her father's photograph, the first clear image she had seen of him since childhood. He looked younger than she remembered, but there was something in his eyes that reminded her of her own determination. "He was one of the best agents we ever had," Victoria said quietly. "His analytical abilities were legendary, but more than that, he had an absolute commitment to justice. Even when his cover was blown and he knew he would have to disappear forever, he insisted on completing his mission." "What happened to the people he was investigating?" "Most of them escaped prosecution because we couldn't complete the investigation without him. The partial evidence he gathered wasn't enough to bring them down. That's why this operation is so important. It's a chance to finish what he started." Sarah felt the weight of legacy settling on her shoulders, but instead of feeling burdened, she felt empowered. Her father had sacrificed everything to fight against injustice, and now she had the opportunity to complete his work. "When do we start?" she asked. Victoria smiled. "We already have. Welcome to the team, Agent Martinez." As Sarah heard her new title for the first time, she realized that the young woman who had walked into this building that morning no longer existed. In her place stood someone with a mission, someone with purpose, someone who had the power to change the world. The transformation was complete and there was no turning back. The silence stretched between them as Sarah stared at the tablet screen, her mind struggling to reconcile her ordinary life with the extraordinary revelation that had just been dropped on her. The financial patterns that had seemed so clear moments before now felt like hieroglyphs from a world she didn't understand. "I know this is overwhelming," Victoria said softly, "but I need you to understand something else. The conspiracy we're investigating isn't just about money laundering or arms dealing. It's about control. The people behind this network have been systematically infiltrating governments, corporations, and institutions around the world. They're not just criminals. They're architects of a shadow system that threatens global stability." Sarah looked up from the screen, meeting Victoria's eyes. "How long has this been going on?" "We believe the network has been building for at least 15 years, possibly longer. Your father was getting close to exposing them when he was extracted. His disappearance wasn't random timing. It was because he had discovered something that could have brought down the entire operation." "What did he discover?" Victoria hesitated, glancing around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "A list of names. Politicians, CEOs, judges, military officials, people in positions of power who had been compromised or recruited. Your father managed to copy partial records before his cover was blown, but he couldn't get the complete files." Sarah felt a chill run through her. "And you think I can find those files?" "We think you can do something even more valuable. The financial networks your father was tracking have evolved and expanded since his extraction. Traditional investigation methods haven't been successful because the patterns are too complex for conventional analysis. But your ability to see connections that others miss could be the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy." Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing toward the windows. The Seattle skyline stretched out before her, the same city she had known her entire life, but suddenly it felt foreign and dangerous. "This is insane. I'm not qualified for this kind of work. I don't have training or experience or—" "You have something more valuable than training," Victoria interrupted. You have intuition and natural ability that can't be taught, and we would provide you with all the support and resources you need." "What kind of support?" Victoria joined her at the window, speaking quietly. "A new identity, if necessary. Housing in a secure location. Access to the most advanced analytical tools available. A team of experienced agents to work with you, and compensation that would change your life and your mother's life forever." The mention of her mother made Sarah pause. Elena Martinez had sacrificed everything to raise her daughter alone, working jobs that destroyed her body and spirit just to keep food on the table. The opportunity to provide her mother with security and comfort was tempting beyond measure. "How much are we talking about?" "Your starting salary would be $200,000 per year, plus bonuses based on the value of your discoveries. Full health benefits, education funding if you want to pursue advanced degrees, and a pension plan that would ensure your financial security for life." Sarah's breath caught. The amount was more money than she had ever imagined earning. It was enough to buy her mother a house, to pay for her medical care, to give them both the kind of life they had only dreamed about. "But there's a catch, isn't there?" Sarah asked. "There's always a catch," Victoria nodded grimly. "Once you're in, you can't get out easily. The knowledge you'll have access to makes you a permanent security risk. Your life will never be completely normal again. You'll always be looking over your shoulder, always wondering who you can trust." Sarah turned away from the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "What happened to my father?" "After he was extracted, he was relocated with a new identity. As far as we know, he's still alive, but he can never contact you or your mother. That separation is permanent for everyone's safety." The finality of that statement hit Sarah hard. Even if she learned more about her father, even if she followed in his footsteps, she would never have a relationship with him. The man who had walked out of her life when she was 8 years old would remain a mystery forever. "I need to talk to my mother," Sarah said finally. Victoria shook her head. "That's not possible, not yet. If you decide to join us, we'll handle telling your mother in a way that protects her. But for now, this conversation has to remain completely confidential." Sarah felt trapped, caught between a life that had never offered her real opportunities and a future that promised everything she wanted, at a price she wasn't sure she could pay. "How long do I have to decide?" 48 hours. "But Sarah, I need you to understand that just knowing what you know now has changed things. We'll have to monitor you regardless of your decision, for your own protection and ours." The implication was clear. Her life had already been altered irrevocably. Whether she accepted their offer or not, she would never be just another college graduate working at a coffee shop. She was now part of something larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. "I want to see more of the financial data," Sarah said suddenly. "If I'm going to make this decision, I need to understand what I'm really being asked to do." Victoria smiled for the first time since their conversation began. "I was hoping you'd say that." She led Sarah to a secure conference room on the building's 5th floor, a space that looked nothing like the corporate offices Sarah had expected. Instead of windows and polished furniture, the room was lined with computer screens, charts, and documents marked with various classifications. It looked more like a military command center than a business meeting room. "This is our temporary operations center," Victoria explained. "We've been using Blackstone Industries as a front for our investigation. The company is legitimate, but it also provides us with the resources and cover we need for this operation." Sarah looked around the room with new understanding. "So my job interview was never real?" "The position we described is real, but it was never for a traditional analyst role. We needed a way to get you here and assess your abilities without raising suspicion." A man in his 40s looked up from one of the computer terminals, his expression serious but welcoming. "You must be Sarah Martinez. I'm Agent David Kim. I've been following your work since your college project." Sarah shook his hand, still feeling surreal about the entire situation. "You've been following my college work? Your analysis of the Westfield embezzlement case was brilliant. You identified patterns that our own forensic accountants missed. We've been hoping to meet you for quite some time." Agent Kim gestured toward the wall of screens displaying financial data, network diagrams, and what appeared to be surveillance photographs. "This is what we're up against. The consortium, as we call them, has been building this network for decades. They've penetrated financial institutions, government agencies, and corporations in over 30 countries." Sarah approached the displays, her analytical mind immediately drawn to the patterns and connections. Even more than before, she could see relationships and structures that seemed to elude the traditional investigators. "There," she said, pointing to a cluster of transactions on one screen. "These aren't random money movements. They're coordinated transfers designed to create artificial market fluctuations. Someone is manipulating currency exchanges to generate profits while destabilizing entire economies." David and Victoria exchanged glances. "That's exactly the kind of insight we need," David said. "But what you've just identified represents only a tiny fraction of their operations. The full scope is almost unimaginable." As Sarah studied the displays more carefully, she began to understand the true magnitude of what she was being asked to confront. This wasn't just about catching criminals or recovering stolen money. This was about exposing a shadow system that had infiltrated the highest levels of power around the world. "If this is all true," she said slowly, "then how do we know who to trust? How do we know that some of the people in your own agencies aren't part of this conspiracy?" Victoria's expression grew grim. "We don't. That's why this operation is being run with such a small team, and why we need someone like you. Someone from outside the traditional intelligence community who can't be compromised by existing loyalties or connections." Sarah realized that she wasn't just being recruited to analyze financial data. She was being asked to become part of a secret war against an enemy that had embedded itself so deeply in the system that traditional law enforcement couldn't root it out. The weight of that responsibility was staggering. But as she looked at the evidence displayed around the room, she also felt something else. A sense of purpose that she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, her unique abilities could be used for something that truly mattered. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of intensive briefings, technical training, and data analysis that pushed Sarah's abilities to their absolute limits. The secure facility where she now worked was hidden beneath a legitimate technology company in downtown Seattle, its existence known only to a handful of federal agents and intelligence officers. Sarah had been given a small but comfortable apartment in the building, complete with advanced security systems and direct access to the operations center. She barely slept, spending most of her time immersed in the financial networks that represented the consortium's global reach. Each discovery led to new questions, and each answer revealed additional layers of complexity. "You've been at this for 18 hours straight," Agent Kim said, setting a cup of coffee on the desk beside her. "You need to rest." Sarah looked up from the screens, her eyes bloodshot but alert. "I'm close to something big. Look at these transaction patterns from the last 6 months." She had arranged the data in a 3-dimensional visualization that showed money flows across time and geography. What had initially appeared to be random financial activity now revealed itself as a carefully orchestrated campaign. "They're not just moving money," Sarah explained, pointing to specific clusters of transactions. "They're positioning themselves for something major. These transfers are all timed to coincide with political events, economic announcements, and market fluctuations." Victoria joined them, studying the visualization with growing concern. "What kind of positioning?" "The kind that suggests they're planning to crash the global economy," Sarah said grimly. "Look at these short positions against major currencies. The massive investments in gold and cryptocurrency, the way they're divesting from traditional markets while buying up critical infrastructure companies." Agent Kim whistled softly. "How much damage could they do? If they trigger their plan at the right moment, they could cause a global recession that would make 2008 look like a minor market correction. Millions of people would lose their jobs, their homes, their life savings, and the consortium would profit from every aspect of the collapse." Victoria immediately reached for her secure phone. "I need to brief the director immediately." "Sarah, how much time do we have?" Sarah studied the patterns more carefully, looking for timeline indicators in the financial data. "Based on the acceleration of these transactions and the positioning of their assets, I'd say we have maybe 2 weeks before they're ready to execute whatever they're planning." 2 weeks to stop a global economic catastrophe," Victoria muttered. "No pressure." "There's more," Sarah said, highlighting a different section of the visualization. "I found something that might be connected to my father's original investigation." She pulled up a series of accounts that had been dormant for years but had recently become active again. The transaction patterns were different from the consortium's usual methods, more subtle and sophisticated. These accounts were established 15 years ago, right around the time my father was extracted. "They've been inactive until last month." when they suddenly started moving massive amounts of money through the same networks the consortium is using. Victoria stared at the data with a mixture of hope and apprehension. You think your father had a contingency plan? I think he knew this day would come. Look at the way these transactions are structured. They're not following the consortium's patterns. They're disrupting them. Agent Kim leaned forward, studying the screen more carefully. It's like he's playing chess with them from beyond the grave. Sarah felt a surge of pride and connection to the father she barely remembered. Even after 15 years of separation, Roberto Castellanos was still fighting the same fight, still trying to protect innocent people from the consortium's greed. Can you trace where these disruption funds are coming from? Victoria asked. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard as she dove deeper into the financial networks. What she found made her breath catch in her throat. They're coming from seized criminal assets, she said in amazement. My father didn't just gather evidence before he was extracted. He managed to freeze and redirect hundreds of millions of dollars in consortium funds. He's been using their own money against them. But how is he controlling these accounts if he's in deep cover? Sarah smiled for the first time in days. He's not controlling them directly. He programmed them with algorithmic triggers tied to specific market conditions and consortium activities. When they started positioning for their economic attack, his countermeasures automatically activated. Victoria shook her head in admiration. Your father was even more brilliant than we realized. But Sarah, this also means something else. What? If Roberto's contingency systems are activating, it means the consortium's plan is further along than we thought. We may have less than 2 weeks. Sarah turned back to the screens with renewed urgency. She could see now that the financial war between her father and the consortium had been raging for 15 years, hidden beneath layers of complexity that only someone with her unique abilities could unravel. I need access to more data, she said. If I can track all of my father's countermeasures, I might be able to figure out exactly what the consortium is planning and how to stop it. What do you need? Everything. Central bank records, Federal Reserve transactions, International Monetary Fund data, classified intelligence on global financial institutions. No restrictions. Victoria hesitated. That level of access could take days to arrange through proper channels. Then don't use proper channels, Sarah said firmly. You said yourself that the consortium has people everywhere. If we wait for official authorization, they'll know what we're doing and find ways to block us. Agent Kim looked uncomfortable. You're talking about illegal access to protected systems. I'm talking about preventing global economic collapse, Sarah replied. Sometimes you have to break small laws to prevent massive crimes. Victoria made a decision. I'll get you the access you need. But Sarah, once we cross this line, we're committed. If we fail, we'll all be charged with serious federal crimes. And if we don't try, millions of innocent people will suffer while the consortium profits from their misery. Over the next several hours, Victoria used her connections and authority to provide Sarah with unprecedented access to global financial systems. As data streams flowed across her screens, Sarah began to see the full scope of both the consortium's attack plan and her father's defensive measures. It's incredible, she murmured, as the complete picture emerged. He anticipated almost everything they're doing. For every move they've made, he's prepared a counter-move. Almost everything. Agent Kim caught the qualification in her statement. Sarah's expression grew troubled. There's one element of their plan that his systems didn't account for. Something that wasn't part of the original conspiracy he was investigating. What is it? They're not just planning to crash the markets through financial manipulation. They've also compromised critical infrastructure systems, power grids, communication networks, transportation hubs. When they trigger the economic collapse, they're going to create physical chaos to amplify the panic. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. Cyber warfare combined with economic warfare. The damage would be exponential. And my father's countermeasures were designed to fight a purely financial battle. They can't stop physical infrastructure attacks. Sarah stared at the screens showing the consortium's multi-pronged assault plan, feeling the weight of responsibility settling even more heavily on her shoulders. Her father had fought brilliantly against an enemy he understood, but the enemy had evolved beyond his expectations. So what do we do? Agent Kim asked. Sarah's expression hardened with determination. We finish what he started and then we do what he couldn't. We stop them completely. She turned back to her workstation, her mind already racing with new possibilities. If her father could wage a secret war across 15 years using nothing but financial algorithms, then she could find a way to adapt his methods to fight a broader battle. "I'm going to need help," she said. "Specialists in cybersecurity, infrastructure protection, and electronic warfare. This isn't just about following money trails anymore." Victoria nodded. "I'll assemble a team." "How much time do you need?" Sarah looked at the countdown timer she had created based on the consortium's transaction patterns. "We have 11 days before they execute their plan. I'll need at least 6 days to develop countermeasures, which gives us 5 days to implement them. And if we can't stop them in time," Sarah's voice was steady but grim, "then the world changes forever, and the consortium becomes the most powerful organization on the planet." As she spoke those words, Sarah realized that the stakes of this operation went far beyond justice or revenge. The future of democratic institutions, economic stability, and global security hung in the balance. And somehow, a young woman who had been working at a coffee shop just days earlier had become one of the few people who could prevent a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. The final week arrived with the intensity of a storm front moving across the horizon. Sarah's team had grown to include 12 specialists from various intelligence agencies, each working around the clock to implement the countermeasures she had designed. The operations center now resembled a war room, with multiple screens tracking everything from global currency fluctuations to power grid vulnerabilities. Sarah stood before the main display, exhaustion evident in her posture but her mind sharper than ever. The financial algorithms her father had created were working perfectly, systematically undermining the consortium's economic positioning. But the infrastructure attacks remained the wild card that could still devastate the global economy. "Status report," Victoria called out as she entered the room with a steaming cup of coffee and a grim expression. "We've successfully neutralized 60% of their financial attack vectors," Sarah reported. "My father's countermeasures, combined with our interventions, have drained approximately $2 billion from their operational accounts and disrupted their currency manipulation strategies." Agent Kim looked up from his cybersecurity station. "But they've accelerated their infrastructure timeline. We're seeing final preparation signals across 17 different target systems. They know we're onto them." Sarah nodded, having expected this development. They're smart enough to realize that their financial networks are being systematically dismantled. The infrastructure attacks are now their primary strategy. "Can we stop them?" Victoria asked. Sarah pointed to a complex network diagram showing interconnected systems across multiple countries. "We can limit the damage, but we can't prevent it entirely. They've spent years embedding themselves in these systems. However, I've identified their coordination hub." The room fell silent as Sarah highlighted a single node in the network that connected to all the others. "Everything runs through a financial clearinghouse in Zurich. If we can physically disrupt their operations there, we can prevent them from coordinating simultaneous attacks across multiple systems." Victoria studied the display with growing understanding. "You're talking about a raid on Swiss soil against an organization that probably has Swiss government connections." "I'm talking about preventing global economic collapse," Sarah replied firmly. "The clearinghouse isn't just coordinating infrastructure attacks. It's also the central hub for laundering the profits they expect to make from the chaos they create." Agent Kim pulled up satellite imagery of the target building. "It's heavily fortified, private security, multiple redundant systems. Getting inside would require a small army, or one person with the right access codes," Sarah said quietly. Victoria turned to her with alarm. "What are you thinking?" "I've been analyzing the personnel records for the clearinghouse. There's someone inside who used to work with my father 15 years ago, someone who might be willing to help us if they knew the truth about what they're really facilitating." Sarah pulled up a personnel file showing a woman in her 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes. "Dr. Catherine Hoffman. She was a financial analyst for the Swiss Federal Banking Commission when my father was conducting his investigation. According to the records, she provided him with critical information about money laundering operations. And now she works for the consortium? She works for the clearinghouse, which she probably thinks is a legitimate financial institution. The consortium operates through so many shell companies and subsidiaries that most of their employees don't realize what they're really part of." Victoria shook her head. "It's too dangerous. If you're wrong about her, if she's actually loyal to the consortium, you'd be walking into a trap." If I don't try, millions of people will suffer when they crash the global economy. Look at the timeline. We have less than 48 hours before they execute their plan. Sarah pulled up projections showing the expected impact of a coordinated economic and infrastructure attack. Stock markets crashing, power grids failing, communication systems going down, transportation networks grinding to a halt. The human cost would be staggering. There has to be another way, Agent Kim protested. There isn't, Sarah said firmly. I've run every scenario, analyzed every possibility. The only way to stop them is to prevent the coordination of their attacks. And the only way to do that is to get inside their command center. Victoria looked around the room at the team of specialists who had been working tirelessly to prevent this catastrophe. These were some of the most capable people in their respective fields. But even their combined expertise hadn't been enough to completely neutralize the threat. What would you need to make contact with Dr. Hoffman? Victoria asked reluctantly. A cover identity that would get me into the building. Background documentation that would convince her I'm legitimate. And a communication system that can't be monitored by consortium security. And if she refuses to help? Sarah's expression was resolute. Then I find another way to disrupt their operations from the inside. But Victoria, I don't think that will be necessary. I've studied Dr. Hoffman's background extensively. She's dedicated her entire career to fighting financial crimes. When she learns what her employers are really planning, she'll want to stop them as much as we do. Over the next 18 hours, Victoria's team worked to create the perfect cover identity for Sarah's mission. She would pose as a financial auditor from an international regulatory body, conducting a routine inspection of the clearinghouse's compliance procedures. The documentation was flawless, backed by real records and multiple government databases. As Sarah prepared to board a flight to Zurich, Victoria pulled her aside for a final conversation. I want you to understand something, Victoria said. What you're doing goes far beyond anything we could officially ask of you. If something goes wrong, if you're captured or compromised, we won't be able to acknowledge your existence or mount a rescue operation. Sarah nodded. I understand. But Victoria, this isn't just about following orders or fulfilling an obligation. This is about finishing what my father started and protecting innocent people from predators who see human suffering as a business opportunity. Your father would be proud of you. I hope so. I hope that somewhere, wherever he is, he knows that his work wasn't in vain. Victoria handed her a small device that looked like an ordinary smartphone. Emergency communication system. If you need extraction or if you discover something critical, use this to contact us immediately. Sarah slipped the device into her jacket pocket and picked up her briefcase, which contained forged documents and hidden recording equipment. As she walked toward the departure gate, she felt the weight of her father's legacy and the hopes of millions of people who had no idea their lives hung in the balance. The flight to Zurich passed quickly, and before she knew it, Sarah was standing outside the imposing glass and steel building that housed the clearinghouse. Security cameras tracked her movement as she approached the entrance, and she forced herself to project confidence despite the nervousness churning in her stomach. Dr. Martinez from the International Financial Regulatory Commission, she announced to the receptionist, presenting her carefully crafted credentials. I have an appointment with Dr. Hoffman regarding compliance audit procedures. As she waited in the elegant lobby, Sarah reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. A week ago, she had been a nobody with an extraordinary gift. Now she was an international agent on a mission to prevent global catastrophe. When Dr. Hoffman appeared in the lobby, Sarah immediately recognized the intelligence and integrity in her eyes that had made her a valuable ally to her father 15 years earlier. This was someone who would understand the gravity of the situation and make the right choice when presented with the truth. Dr. Martinez, Catherine Hoffman said, extending her hand with a professional smile. I understand you're here about compliance procedures. Shall we go to my office to discuss the details? As they walked toward the elevator, Sarah knew that the next few hours would determine whether her father's 15-year war against the consortium would finally end in victory, or whether the world would descend into economic chaos from which it might never recover. The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming, but she also felt a strange sense of peace. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The elevator doors closed, and Sarah prepared to reveal the truth that would either save the world or get her killed. Either way, She would honor her father's memory and use her gift in service of justice. The girl who had been mocked for her simple ID just 1 week earlier was about to change the course of history.